Well, I think it's 7 o'clock. Good evening, and I'm Susan Taylor, and we're here tonight to see part two of Canal Times, presented to you by the Friends of the Delaware Canal. Tonight, we're going to be traveling from New Hope down to Bristol, a little less than half the Delaware Canal. So without further ado, I'm going to go into screen sharing. So here we go. And I have to back up. To start out our slide presentation, we're having two things that some people are not terribly fond of: Canada geese and duckweed, both of which the canal has in abundance. Duckweed is like a lovely green carpet, and it does have benefits as a food source for migrating birds. And in fact, in Australia, they grow it for human consumption because it's such a high protein food. And here we are in New Hope. This is back in the good old days when the canal boat ride was still running. The boat ride started out in 1954, run by Pete Pascuzzo, who had robin's egg blue boats. This photo looks to me to be in the 1970s realm. You'll see that the boat has stopped. The boat captain is looking down into the water. The mule tender's looking down into the water, which probably means that somebody dropped something into the water. They were indeed the good old days when people got to stand out on the deck, and adults paid $1.10 for that hour ride, and children paid 55 cents. Here in New Hope, we have the lock tender's house, which stands at Lock 11. The house is the headquarters of the Friends of the Delaware Canal. And also the Friends have created a mini house museum with the theme Life at the Lock. The picture that you're seeing depicts the day that the Friends' Miles of Mules mule, Ben, came back. The project was a Delaware and Lehigh National Heritage Corridor project, and there were over 165 mules spread out over 165 miles from Bristol to Wilkes-Barre. The Friends commissioned artist James Feehan to do our organization's mule, who we named Ben after Ben Toy, a former president and wonderful man. And Ben stood, where did he stand? Anyway, he went to auction, and John and Lorraine Thompson from the Thompson dealerships bid up $14,000 for Ben. They took Ben home for a year to their farm in Bedminster and let him live there. And then they very, very kindly donated him back to the Friends. And this is arrival day with John Thompson there in his khaki pants and blue shirt, overlooking the arrival. And Ben eventually made his way up, up into the lock tender's house garden and stood there for a number of years until people started to vandalize him. He was vandalized 4 times. We had a fiberglass expert who did Corvettes fix him 4 times, and he finally said, you know, this is going to be an elephant, not a mule. So time to give up. Today, Ben is living in the wicket shanty at Lock 11. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, if you have questions, you can put it in chat, or you can put them in the Q&A section, and I'll pick up on them at some point. This is a picture of a water iris. Lovely, lovely flowers that bloom in the late spring, and there's an abundance of them around Lock 11 in New Hope. And it's being visited by a dragonfly. I had to add this picture because this was quite the to-do. This was taken in New Hope along Main Street at the lock tender's house garden. One day I was walking down the towpath to work, and in front of me up flew this big thing. What is that? It was very startling. And the big thing flew down into the garden and perched on the fence and just sat there and sat there. And then it sort of flew down and sat in the garden for a while and flew over and sat near the murals on the trash bin. And at this point, I was getting very worried because it was a really strange behavior for an owl. I discovered that, looked it up, was a great horned owl. And after talking to some more animal experts, people that better at animals than I, or birds, found out that horned owl was probably just fine. It was probably a juvenile who had become disoriented. So it was out at the wrong time of day, didn't quite know where it was, and it was just trying to get its bearings. And eventually, after about 2 hours, it flew away. But quite the morning. The following two photos came to the friends from a resident at Penswood Village over in Newtown. His father took these photographs in the early 1940s after the canal had closed for commercial operation. This is a photo showing a view looking south from Lock 10 in New Hope toward Lock 9. The bridge over the waterway would be the beginning of Lock 9. I'm going to see if I can find the laser pointer. Come on, laser pointer. Yes. Thank you. There's the laser pointer. So here's the canal. Coming directly into the canal would be Dark Hollow Run, which can carry a tremendous volume of water. So to deal with that volume of water, you have both an overflow. The canal has a depression here, and excess canal water can flow out underneath this walkway. And then down here, you have a wastegate, which also allows excess water to be released from the canal. Then you have the toll collector's house. And across the canal, you have the wicket shanty to operate the drop gate and the lock tender's house. So this scene looks very, very different today. The toll collector's house is just a portion of a much larger home. Of course, here in New Hope, canal boatmen could leave the Delaware Canal and go across the river via cable ferry to the Delaware and Raritan Canal in New Jersey. So if you were leaving, the company wanted to collect the toll. Therefore, it was appropriate to have a toll collector here in New Hope. This is the other photo from Mr. Smith. This shows his wife and Mr. Smith's younger brother standing at the southern end of Lock 8. And as you'll see, the River House, before it became Odette's, stood by Lock 8. You have a wicket shanty over on the other side for the drop gate mechanisms. And this boat is probably a work boat. And of course, all these buildings are now gone, as is the River House, which has been moved to the corner of Riverwoods Drive and Main Street. And it's 1940s, so things are growing up and looking a little less than pristine. The Friends of the Delaware Canal, while we could have group programming, often had full moon walks, and tonight is a full moon, so we could have had a walk tonight. And our favorite place to do that is starting out at the Bowman's Hill section of Washington Crossing Park and then walking north into New Hope, because you see the moon coming up over the hillsides in New Jersey, and it really can be stunning. This picture was taken at the Bowman's, should say the northern section of Washington Crossing Historic Park, looking north from the bridge over the canal. And this has been my computer screensaver for at least 15 years. I like this photo that much. The Friends also have kayaking activities in partnership with the Delaware Canal State Park educators. The educators bring kayaks, and we go out on the canal. It's really a perfect opportunity to literally get your feet wet on the sport of kayaking. And this photo is in here because you never know who's going to be a spectator. And obviously I like geese when I was putting this together. Soon it will be spring, it will be nesting time, and goslings will hatch. Goslings, you have to admit, are very sweet, but their mothers and fathers are not, if they think you're threatening the goslings. And a real switch in seasons here. These are asters, lovely wildflowers that bloom in the fall. There's the good showing of asters from the northern section of Washington Crossing Park south to essentially where Route 32 crosses over the canal, north of the other section of Washington Crossing Park. But last year, the Friends of the Delaware Canal, through the very generous contributions of our members and supporters, were able to restore the Thompson-Neely Camelback Bridge, which is one of the 6 authentic camelback bridges over the canal. Restoring the camelbacks is the Friends' quest, and 5 of the 6 are done. Spars Bridge remains, and that's actually going to get started after a lot of bumps in the road. So I guess we'll be talking to you about that more. This is the first day of work. The man is Randy Meyer, who is just a absolute craftsman and expert now in restoring camelback bridges, and his assistant Jane. And as you can see on the first day of work, you mostly bring in timber. And this is the Thompson-Neely Bridge after it was completed. And on the bridge is Assistant Park Manager Beth Hare. Those of you who have met Beth know she is very, very competent and now has gotten her very own park out at Evansburg and Fort Washington. So she's a full-fledged park manager now. And as you'll notice in this picture, more geese. Going farther south, we come to the northern boundary of Washington Crossing Park South. And there is a bridge across the canal there, which is called Crow's Bridge. And for a very long time, we would call it Canoer's Die Bridge because that's what someone had written on it in white paint across the deck. Swans reside in this particular section of the canal, making it even more picturesque. And what I'd like you to take note of is the depth of the deck of this bridge. This is not an authentic camelback. It has a faux truss, so it has somewhat the resemblance of a camelback. But look at the deck, and then look how thin this deck is in comparison. Authentic camelback bridges can only accommodate pedestrian loads, 2,000 pounds at most. So they're very delicate, and they essentially set the design standards for bridges along the canal, where the goal is always to make them as delicate as can be while still being serviceable. There's the swans who mate for life. In Washington Crossing Park, there's a lagoon that sits right by the canal. It's not supplied with water from the canal. It's spring-fed, and this picture was taken by Judy Grieger, who sort of hangs out at Washington Crossing, honing her skills on photography, and she has become a really superb photographer. So this is an egret taking off from the lagoon. In Washington Crossing itself, you have the town of Taylorsville, and that was its name before it became Washington Crossing. This is an old postcard view of the house, store, and post office. And this building was used by the park as an ice cream shop or an old-fashioned general store. And right now, none of the buildings within historic Taylorsville in the confines of the park are being used. There has been a capital project approved and about to get started to rehabilitate them, and it's really high time. It'll be great when that's done. Taylorsville business people and merchants did indeed utilize the canal to get supplies and products. This spring, take note, and I'll knock on wood that they come up this year, on Taylorsville Road going going south from Route 532 along the embankment of Taylorsville Road is really the best stand of bloodroot that you will find anywhere close to here. More bloodroot than you'll find even at the Bowman's Hill Wildflower Preserve. They are a spring ephemeral, short-lived, beautiful, but you have to see them quickly. And these are cardinal flowers. Going south, there's a very prolific stand of cardinal flowers if one can ever find cardinal flowers growing prolifically. Just north of the Scudder's Falls Bridge along the canal. So if you want to see these lovely wildflowers, that's where to go to see them. And in this case, a spice bush swallowtail is enjoying one. Okay. The Scudder's Falls Bridge will include a pedestrian walkway, which will make the 7th bridge crossing connecting the Delaware Canal in Pennsylvania to the Delaware and Raritan Canal in New Jersey. I just got an email yesterday that our new signs are ready so that we can replace the existing PA and J loop trail sign with new ones that show the new crossing. The Friends came up with the idea of the Loop Trail project and have been successful in receiving grant funding, primarily from the Bucks County Conference and Visitors Bureau, to put up the signage, produce rack cards, and the Loop Trail system, which requires no backtracking, which is a true benefit, has really become one of the most popular features on both the Delaware Canal and the Delaware and Raritan Canal. This is a picture taken after the first snow. This is the approach ramp in Pennsylvania. Over here's the towpath. Come on over, go up the ramp, and then get onto the pedestrian walkway on the Scudder's Falls Bridge, which is I-295. And then over in New Jersey, you'll come back down and into Ewing, New Jersey. The New Jersey side of this ramp structure is not nearly as progressed as the Pennsylvania side. So it's anticipated that it'll open hopefully in about Labor Day, and our Loop Trail signs will be in storage until that time, because the Joint Toll Bridge Commission certainly doesn't want people trying to use the walkway when it isn't open. And there's no shortage of deer browsing. This is really a picture that tells a lot of stories. It's taken in Yardley Borough. Here is the aqueduct over Brock Creek, which allows Brock Creek to flow under the canal to the Delaware River. This is what's called Edgewater Avenue, which Yardley Borough paved the towpath way back when, without permission. And if you're on Edgewater Avenue today, you'll see a line of houses, which weren't here when this postcard view was taken, which I'm going to say is maybe about 1920-ish. The other thing that's very interesting is we're used to seeing canal boats that are covered, and the coal is within the hull. In this case, someone has privately utilized a scow, a workboat, for hauling coal. So they just put coal right into the scow. And that would have been very unusual. And you notice how they get on and off the boat with that little board. Can you imagine hauling the coal off that boat over that little board? And on the opposite side of the canal, you have a recreation boat with a pretty striped canopy. Guy standing over here. looking pretty spiffy. And over here, out of the picture behind the trees, is the Yardley grist mill. Um, the grist mill was converted to have the ability to use canal water to power it. And thus, when the canal was nominated to be a National Historic Landmark, the grist mill was added as a contributing structure to that National Historic Landmark designation. This week apparently is Invasive Species Week. So we're throwing in some invasives on the Delaware Canal, and we really don't have a shortage of them, to be sure. This is garlic mustard. It comes up in the spring and has those little white flowers. The best thing about garlic mustard to me is that it can be pulled out really, really easily. It's the most fun invasive to remove that you can possibly have. Of course, just pulling it out doesn't do the trick, and you have to do that for about 4 years in a row, but it's good. Have fun. When you see garlic mustard, pluck it out. Another invasive that we have in abundance is Japanese knotweed. And now that spring is coming, it will be sprouting up. And I've never eaten it, but I'm told that you can eat the sprouts. So if you're in the mood and want some different salad mix, here you go, Japanese knotweed. South of Yardley, we come to Black Rock Road, and this is another place where kayaks can be launched relatively easily. This is one of my favorite parts of our kayaking the canal activities, when people using the kayaks get in the kayaks and figure out how they're going to fit and whether the seat's right and whether the legs work. So it's fun. South of Black Rock Road is the widest of the wide waters along the Delaware Canal. Some sections of the canal were intentionally built wider as pullovers, much like highways have shoulders today. In fact, when the canal closed, canal boats, if the boatmen didn't want them, were abandoned in the wide waters. Today, the wider areas of the canal have evolved into really rich habitats, and finding piles of turtles on logs is very, very common. And yes, there can be ice skating on the canal. And ice sitting, as you'll see, and I intentionally left off this picture the fact that these people also had a grill out on the ice, which didn't seem like a terribly good idea to me. As you all probably know, ever since Hurricane Sandy, trees falling into the canal have been the bane of everyone's existence. You know, 1 or 2 trees can fall in a day, every day, for long periods of time. The Friends of the Delaware Canal helped out the park with some of the really large trees by hiring a tree service to come in and deal with it. This was a feat of daring do on a tree that had fallen down on the northern end of Morrisville. And this tree guy is standing in teensiest kayak I've ever seen, wielding a chainsaw, but he got the job done. This is the canal where Pennsylvania Avenue is running in this direction, and Union Street comes off of Pennsylvania Avenue over here. This bridge is going to be replaced. Talks are just beginning about the, no, I shouldn't say that. The design is essentially done, but the bridge itself won't be replaced until 2024. And it's very, very lovely Victorian home. Stands there. South of Morrisville, there's the relatively new, it's called the Conrail Tunnel. Okay. Going down the southern end of the canal, particularly when U.S. Steel was building its Fairless Works, the canal was in the way of progress. And many things happened to the canal that were detrimental to the canal itself. Route 1 was built over the canal, and the piers plopped right down in the canal. Many crossings were turned into culverts. Here at the railroad crossing that ran over to the USX plant, the canal just was put through a culvert pipe. You have to imagine a culvert pipe there. And to get around that obstruction, either you had to climb up this embankment, which was gravel at the time, or you had to go around and down to the railroad tracks, dangerously near the rails, and come back onto the towpath at the other side through a state and federally funded project. This tunnel was put through, so if you're on the towpath, you can simply walk through the tunnel. The funding wasn't available and wouldn't be available for decades to run the waterway through. So the pedestrian tunnel is what we have. And interestingly enough, for as many as time as I've gone through that section, I have never, ever seen a train go over those tracks. And the day of the dedication of the tunnel, here comes a CSX car. I don't know whether they heard about the dedication or not. And then subsequently, we did have a walk to go through the tunnel. Great blue herons are in great abundance. And as one progresses south on the canal through Falls Township, I like to think of the canal as a green oasis, because on either side of the canal, you have industries and the railroad and water towers and utility complexes, businesses. But when you're in the canal towpath on the waterway, it's gentle and peaceful, and you really don't think about those other things being there, and neither do the critters. And here you can see a hint of what stands behind the tree line. And you have to watch who's hiding. And there are things hiding for sure. Probably 20 years ago, the Friends of the Delaware Canal got a call saying, did you know that the remains of 2 canal boats were in the canal just north of Tullytown and just north of the Route 13 crossing? And we said no. And the gentleman who called said that as children, he and his friend actually played in the boats. The full boat structure was still there. At this point in time, all that was left were the remains of the bottom. The Friends of the Delaware Canal hired a marine archaeologist. The marine archaeologist came and did a photographic recordation as well as scale drawings. And so we have a record of what was there. The advice from the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission was to simply cover the remains over, because if they remained exposed to the air, what was left would rot away. Here we have a picture of Josh and Mark, who have just installed a replacement panel on an interpretive sign that explains about the canal boat graveyard. And it includes a picture of the marine archaeologist doing the recordation. So you just never know what you're going to find. The man also told us about a dump, and we went there, and there were some remnants of, harness and such, but most of the good stuff, if there was good stuff, had already been taken. Farther south on the canal, past the Levittown Shopping Center, there are an abundance of Osage orange shrubs. At this point, they're looking a little the worse for wear. Normally, they're rather bright chartreuse and make neat natural Christmas decorations. If you look on the internet, you'll read that critters do not like to eat Osage oranges. And this squirrel obviously did not consult the internet because he's having a perfectly good time eating it. This is really an iconic picture of a camelback bridge. It was taken at Tullytown, and I'm not real clear where this bridge was. There's so many, that landscape is so changed, it's hard to tell where it might have been. So not only do you have a loaded canal boat coming south, you have the mule team on the canal, you have two kids watching. Oh, actually, there are four kids, two standing, two sitting, hanging their legs over the side. And this little structure over here was described as a canoe club. And here we have an American robin and a goldfinch taking a bath. One of the things that I find most interesting is that if you talked to people who played in the canal in their youth, and their youth was in the 1940s and 1950s, nearly every one of them learned to swim in the canal because it wasn't terribly deep, it was pretty safe. So no swimming today by human beings, but certainly the birds still like it. Here's an old picture of Lock 4. Lock 4 is out of the way today. It's located between Edgeley Road and Airport Road, and both of those come off of Route 13. And Lock 4 was partially restored in the 1970s. It doesn't have gates, but the walls are there. And here we are in Bristol Borough. And again, this photograph is telling a lot of stories. Here you have the Grundy Woolen Mill, and the postcard was taken after 1911. 1911 because this clock tower was erected in 1911. And that was a landmark for canal boatmen because if they were coming from the north and they spied the clock tower, they knew that their trip was almost at an end. You have industry on the, I'll call it the west side, the Leadham Carpet Mill on the east side, and in the canal going north, you have an unloaded boat, a light boat, and it looks like there's a coal yard here because you see those little cranes coming out, probably to unload cargo. And then coming south toward the river, you have a loaded boat, and it's a Lehigh-Cola navigation boat because you see the bullseye on it. And there's a lot of growth in the water because the tow rope has all this stuff hanging on it. But what is this guy doing in the water? You have to wonder. One of the things that we knew about the Delaware Canal was that there were two bump bridges, both located in Bristol Borough, the only place where bump bridges were built, but there was very little documentation about them. There was an aerial photo where you really couldn't tell what was going on, and not much of a description. So when the Friends of the Delaware Canal embarked on redoing the interpretive signs in the borough, we made a great effort to figure out what the bump bridges were and received help through the wonders of the internet from canalers from Ohio and Indiana, where they do indeed have bump bridges, and they supplied drawings, and the drawings, matched up with that aerial view. So Dennis Gerhardt prepared a drawing to show how a bump bridge worked. So a canal boat would come along, bump it, the bridge itself would pivot, and then when the boat was through, it would pivot back into place. The bump bridges were installed at Jefferson Avenue by the Grundy Mill and at the southern end of the Grundy Mill at Washington Avenue, about 1893, when those two streets were put through, and the industries at that point obviously wanted at-grade crossings rather than going up an incline up and over a regular canal bridge. So there we have bump bridges. This is a photograph of Lock 2, which is located just a little north of the head of Mill Street, the top of Mill Street, which is the main commercial street in Bristol Borough. And there's really nothing here at all. All the buildings are gone. There's an interpretive device to show you where the lock gates once were. You have a nice photo here of a mule tender and a mule, and the mule appears to have its fly tack on, which were strips of leather that would move across the mule's body to keep flies from biting it. This was an important spot. All right, we pass Lock 2, heading toward the river, and we come to the bend where the canal took a sharp turn. So you're coming from Lock 2 down the canal, and you need to make a sharp bend right here into Lock 1. And this is the lock tender's house for Lock 1. The water of the canal either went toward the river and flowed into a basin or flowed over this falls into Otter Creek and out into what's known today as the Bristol Marsh. So that was, you had to slow down a lot and you had to make a rather sharp turn. Here's a picture of the tide lock. Lock one, the tide lock, and essentially that was to prevent the tidal water from the Delaware River from inundating the canal basin. Here at the tide lock, you had an office occupied by a toll collector. And back here was the Bristol Basin in which canal boats were stored. Over here, you see boats with head on into the basin. And these are two photos of the basin itself. Today, the basin is where the Borough Municipal Parking Lot is and Riverfront Park. You have two canal boats and Carpenter's Mill, which was the first mill erected in Bristol. And there's still a little bit of one wall that you can see. And the other photo shows the buildings on Mill Street and the rear of the buildings that came out into the basin. Almost as soon as the canal went out of commercial operation, there was a move to fill in the basin using dredgings from the Delaware River. That went on, and it was finally filled in the 1950s. In fact, we did an oral history with some folks in Bristol, and a woman remembered having the borough Easter egg hunt in the basin when it was just sand from the river. And here's the ribbon cutting for the new Bristol Borough interpretive signs. These signs essentially tell the story of the last 7/10 of a mile of canal that was filled in after the canal went out of business. So they go from the different locks to the basin, to the tide lock, talking about all that industry. So it's a very, very interesting story. Bristol Borough has an incredibly rich history. And we were able to do that project in partnership with the Bristol Cultural and Historical Foundation, Bristol Borough Council, the Bucks County Conference and Visitors Bureau, and the Grundy Foundation. So it was a true partnership. And I put these two guys in because we do have fun. Back when such things could take place, the friends would take a table to Bristol's First Friday celebrations, and kids would decorate ducks. And this guy was just so funny with his little man bun and totally into it. And this guy just totally delighting in what he had created and was really anxious to show it to his father. The Friends of the Delaware Canal, and every year except last year when we couldn't do it because of COVID, since 1988, I shouldn't have said every year, since 1988, the Friends have walked all 58.9 miles of the Delaware Canal. The walk was originated by Will Ravinis, who's right here, wearing his end-to-end hat. And this picture was taken somewhere along the line. And there's me, there's my husband, Jerry, both with different color hair. and John Ney, who walked the Delaware Canal at least 15 years in a row. And so we don't know what's up with the canal walk this year. We're still awaiting word that we can actually have programs at all. That prohibition is supposed to end on March 31st, but you never know. Here's hoping. And this picture was taken at the end of the canal walk of the people who had walked all 58.9 miles. And as you can tell, she's still raring to go. The mile zero of the Delaware Canal is today out in the Delaware River. Erosion has caused that original start point to be now out in the water. So the Friends of the Delaware Canal has been around since 1982. And we try to do all that we can to make the canal a better and happier place for the residents and visitors and businesses, as shown by this eastern bluebird. It's actually one of my favorite pictures. And sometimes we have to put up a fuss about what's going on, but always our goal is to ensure that the canal is maintained, restored, preserved, and improved for future generations. So we'd very, very much like your help. Please sign up for our emails. And most of all, please become a member. Our strength is in our numbers, for sure. And look at our Facebook page. We have lots of wonderful nature photographs. And I do believe I forgot to thank Carol Meebus, who took many of the nature photographs that were featured here. She and Judy Grieger go out on the canal nearly every day and take some picture or other, because there's always something different to see. And that's the end of the presentation. And I will go up and see what's in Q&A. Okay, like the owl. How about the area of the canal that comes down to South Canal Street in Yardley Borough? Yes, you have Edgewater Avenue to the north of the canal is a residential area. And then to the south, you have a street called South Canal Street, which was originally a canal boat yard. And there's worker housing still existing along South Canal Street. And South Canal Street is indeed part of Yardley Borough's historic district. Okay, and there's markers. And Shirley Coursey says, yes, I was raised there. And that's an important part of Yardley Borough history. What happened in the South Canal Street neighborhood and what happened in the neighborhoods between the river and the canal. And okay, I need to figure out how to make this move. Okay, and a thank you. And thank you all for being with us tonight and looking at pictures. We have so many pictures of the canal that, it's just almost imperative to share them. Great. In fact, well, there'll be a new show probably in a couple of months. We got in members who have since moved to Delaware, gave us their collection of canal and river things that they accumulated over the years. And there's lots of postcards in it. So we wanted to scan those and be able to show those images. And there's nobody in chat, I don't think. Yes, there's lots of chat. Okay, lots of thank yous. Thank you all for joining us tonight. It's always a pleasure, and we hope to be able to see you in real life soon. It's much more fun talking to real people than talking to my computer screen, but enjoy the canal. We'll all be able to go out there without stomping in the snow soon and see spring emerge. So, thanks a lot. And I'm going to end the meeting unless somebody does something really quickly. Okay. Good night. See you soon.